In this video, we're going to be covering watches that I really want, but just can't afford. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always. And before we start this video, if you do enjoy these videos, please consider hitting that subscribe button to support the Chisholm Hunter channel and help us reach our next goal as well as our next giveaway. And without further ado, let's dive straight in to the first epic watch. The first watch we're starting with is one that is so out there, so outrageous, that it's honestly awesome. And The Rock can actually be seen wearing this exact model. This is the AP Royal Oak self-winding chronograph in frosted white gold with a beautiful, a stunning purple dial. It's outrageous, I know. It's one of these things that you either love or hate, a bit like Marmite, but I just love it. So let's begin with the price before we dive into the stats and the key features, because the price is... the price is the price. So the price comes in at £150,000 to £200,000. And part of the reason for that is that this is a limited edition model, limited to 200 pieces worldwide. And we have a brand as popular as AP, a brand that's in the Holy Trinity. 200 really isn't a lot. It really isn't. This model comes in at 41 millimeters in diameter, which typically for a chrono is that little bit smaller. But what is honestly just sublime about this watch, it's honestly unbelievable, is the fact that it has an 11 millimeter thickness. 11 millimeters. Now, when a brand make a movement in-house and it's that thin, that is when you know the quality is just unbelievable. This watch, of course, comes in 18 karat white gold, and the bracelet and also the head is in this white gold color. Now, around the bezel, that really distinctive AP Royal Oak looking bezel, it does have lines of polished accents to that watch, which kind of defines the shape that little bit more and just makes it, it's just so sexy. It is water resistant to 50 meters, of course, has sapphire crystal glass with glare proof reflection stuff on there as well. And it has a grape or a plum dial. That's what they're calling it, a plum purple dial. It's purple. Now, this plum purple dial does have a grande tapestry pattern with rhodium toned counters, white gold applied hour markers, and the Royal Oak hands with luminescent coating. This watch sports the caliber 2385 movement, which of course is in-house, and this has 37 jewels. Of course, is self-winding, meaning it's totally automatic, and it has that rotor spinning around in the back. It has 40 hours of power. It comes in at 26.2 millimeters in diameter, and it has 304 parts. Now, just imagine that for a second. 304 parts crammed in to 11 millimeters. Crazy. Next up, we have another watch from the Holy Trinity. Another watch that I'm obsessed with. Another watch that they can't even show the price on their website because it's that damn expensive. This is the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Tourbillon in full titanium, coming in at 42.5 millimeters in diameter. Now, I'm obsessed with Vacheron brand. They produce such a low quantity of watches that it just screams rarity. And I feel like they're the only brand within the Holy Trinity that have more pedigree. They have a little bit, in my opinion, more classiness, more underratedness. I just love them. This watch, of course, comes in grade 5 titanium, which gives it that much more of a darker aesthetic to the likes of stainless steel. And it also makes it light as a feather. Now, one of the points that I love about this watch is the tourbillon in the middle that you can see straight into. You can see your heartbeat, the heartbeat of your watch, do-do, 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 in real time. It's just, something like that is art. This watch comes in at 42.5 millimeters in diameter, as mentioned previously, and it comes in at 10.39 millimeters in thickness. 10.39. It, of course, has a sunburst satin finished lacquered dial, and Vacheron's blue dials on their overseas range are something that you need to see in person. It is like electric blue that flashes through your dial depending on the light that you have it in. Honestly, Vacheron watches dials are some of the most beautiful in the world. I don't know how they do it. I don't know why they do it. I don't know how it's formed, how it's made, but it is. I just love the Vacheron ethos of traveling overseas. And it's something that definitely appeals to me as a photographer and as a videographer. I do a lot of travel. But then we get to the price. The price, which is on request on Vacheron's website, comes in at £137,000. I'd have to remortgage my house, sell my car, 4 cameras, and I'd maybe be able to afford a quarter of that. Next up, we're taking a step down in price, but we're staying with the Vacheron Constantin brand. This year at Watches and Wonders 2024, they released new overseas green dial models, and those green dial models were just unbelievable. Now, what I think they will do in the future is release the green dial in stainless steel instead of the pink gold. But there's something classy, there's something dressy, there's something just unbelievable about the pink gold paired with that green dial. So let's talk about it. This is the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Self-Winding 41mm in pink gold. It of course comes in 41mm, which everyone knows and loves, and it comes in at 10.69mm in thickness. Again, you've got a really, really thin watch, and again, I'm going to bring up the argument that thickness correlates to price quite heavily, because depending on the quality of the movement, depends on if it's thicker or thinner. This watch is water resistant to 15 bar and of course has an intense green lacquer dial. And similar to the blue dial on the Vacheron, it has similar vibes to it apart from its different color. It flashes, it flares, it is just a work of art within the dial, and you really need to see them in person. The price of that model comes in at a cool, calm, really, really low £58,500. Or 58,500. Yeah, it's a lot. Next up, we have another Holy Trinity line on the Patek Philippe Nautilus. This is the 5711A with a beautiful green dial again. Again, I think I'm just kind of getting really attracted to green dials at the moment. I think that's the new thing to me. Out with the white, in with the green. So a couple of years ago, and I'm talking maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the blue dial 5711 got discontinued. And after the blue dial got discontinued, they released this, the 5711A, and this is the green dial variant. This comes in at 40mm and 8.3mm in thickness. And don't make me say it, but that's really thin. It of course comes in stainless steel and has water resistant of 120 meters. And I feel like Patek Philippe Nautilus, the Patek Philippe Nautilus is the creme de la creme. It's at the top of the tree. It is the biggest bang when it comes to sports watches in the luxury watch industry. Hence why they're so blooming expensive, especially when they're discontinued. I remember being at Wimbledon when I was quite young. I must have been 19, and I was with a brand called Baume & Mercier. And I remember seeing this really, really handsome Italian-looking guy. He must have been maybe 25, 26. And he had a Patek Philippe Nautilus on. And ever since that day, I've kind of strived to own a Patek Philippe Nautilus one day. Hopefully one day. But I do prefer VC Overseas at the moment. I don't know what it is. I just think they're crushing it. The price on this model is between 170 to 190,000 pounds if you have box and papers. And please remember when you are buying a pre-owned watch or a luxury watch to get the box and papers to prove its authenticity. That's a lot of money. That's insane. Up next, we have a watch that I reviewed about 2.5 years ago, believe it or not. How time flies. This is the Blancpain 50 Fathoms NORAD limited edition. Of course, being a limited edition, it fetches a lot more money now because of the limited numbers. In terms of history, you just can't get better than Blancpain. They are the oldest watch brand in the world. Not in continuous production, because that goes to Vacheron, but in the world, Blancpain have that crown. And back in the day, Blancpain used to supply the Navy with diving watches. And what they would use on their diving watches is questionable, because it's radioactive. Or back in those days, it was radioactive. Now, when they realized that the substances they used on their dials were radioactive, they made a huge change. Of course, they never meant to harm anyone. It's just that their knowledge wasn't up to scratch. And that goes along the lines of everyone in the industry at that point. So they changed their radioactive materials to superluminova. And to tell the divers that they weren't wearing a radioactive watch anymore, what they would do is they'd put a radiation symbol with a big X through it. And that's how the divers knew that the watches they were wearing were safe. Now, of course, that was a very, very long time ago, but history in watch brands is one of the main drivers to the brand. Because a lot of watches can tell the time. It's about the histories and the story that you can tell. And this is a hell of a story. So obviously Blancpain released this NORAD limited edition with that piece of history on it to tell everyone that it didn't have any radiation on it. And it was a huge hit. In fact, it sold out worldwide and I can't find any on the pre-owned market. This Blancpain comes in at 40.3 millimeters in diameter and of course comes in full stainless steel and has a 100-hour power reserve. 100 hours. Wow. It has a case thickness of 13 millimeters, but remember that it is housing 100 hours of power resistance in there. And it does come with a rubber strap, a black dial, and of course that massive NORAD symbol in the middle, which is just awesome. Now, if you were to pick this watch up new, it'd be around about £14,000, but you can't because they're all sold out. I would assume that they'd be around about £30,000 to £40,000 now because of the limited nature and the history behind these watches, as well as the popularity. Blancpain are a brand that have definitely been catching my eye at the moment more. I need to do some more reviews of them. And on that note, it's time for the wrist check. Please let me know what is on your wrist today. Please let me know if you have a vintage watch on. At the moment, I would consider this technically vintage. This is my Tudor Black Bay, and it's the ETA Smiley variant. It's an old boy now, an old stallion. I think I got this in 2016, 17, back when I was young, had a full head of hair. But let me know in the comments what you have on today. I love seeing all the weird and wonderful watches you guys have. The next watch we're going to talk about sold at 14.2 million, or it sold for 14.2 million pounds. This is the Paul Newman 6239 Daytona. Starting in the 1960s, Rolex began offering a unique dial variation for Daytona chronographs, and this was officially named the Exotic Dials by Rolex catalogs. It was quite an aesthetic departure from the regular Daytona dials, and it featured a step, minute track, and an Art Deco style font for the chronograph registers. Today, these exotic dials are collectively known as Paul Newman dials, and the Rolex chronographs that contain them are known as Paul Newman Daytona watches. Okay, so let's talk about why they're called Paul Newman Daytonas. Like, what's the history behind that? As the story goes, this is what I've heard. In a brilliant marketing move, Italian auction houses hyped up the fact that Paul Newman himself wore a Daytona with an exotic dial and began referring to these pieces as the Paul Newman Daytona watches. And this kind of fueled the hype of these Daytona watches to the point where they just exploded in price. Introduced in 1963, the Rolex reference 6239 is the first iteration of the Rolex Daytona that is also Paul Newman's first Daytona, in addition to being the actual reference that Paul Newman himself wore. And that is why it fetched such a huge price when it came to the auction. Honestly, this watch is just stunning. This watch, of course, has a black dial with white sub-counters and it has a red tract round the edges. It also has the Rolex 6239 movement, which is interesting because it's either the Valjoux 72 or the Valjoux 722 manual wind mechanical movement with 17 jewels. So yeah, this was a super cool watch that sold at a super high price. The next watch is one that you can see Mark Wahlberg wearing, Leonardo DiCaprio wearing, Jay-Z wearing. It is so limited and it made such a bang when it first came out that it was almost unattainable to everybody, apart from the uber famous. This is the Tiffany Patek Philippe Nautilus. This Patek Philippe Nautilus was released in December of 2021 and it has the reference number 5711/1A-018. This was created to commemorate the long-lasting partnership between Patek Philippe and Tiffany. This watch is essentially a traditional Nautilus with a really brightly Tiffany colored dial, and we all know the Tiffany hype. Now, this watch was produced in only 170 units worldwide and was only available at Tiffany & Co stores. So essentially, those that had a great relationship with both Patek and also Tiffany, but also had an extremely high following, for example, Leonardo DiCaprio, they're the type of people that would get this watch because they attract others to the brand. Now, on the grey market, on the pre-owned market, this watch trades for around about £3 million. I just hit the mic because I was so shocked by that figure. But actually, at auction, I believe this sold at around $6.5 million. I mean, it is just a color change, and I know it's limited, but Jesus, this is wild. The next watch we're going to talk about is probably my favorite of the bunch. I love how different this watch is and how it feels and looks, and it's just awesome. This is the AP Royal Oak UAE edition Ref 26613 ST. This watch was launched in 2020 as a collection of just 75 pieces. So there was only 75 worldwide, meaning that this would have been, no matter what they produced, an unbelievable hit. It just helps that it's super sexy. This was only offered to VIPs in the United Arab Emirates, and this really rare Royal Oak showcases Audemars Piguet commitment to the country. I just feel that that teal blue that they've used, combined with that moon phase, the kind of darkened blue of the moon phase, Then you pair that with white gold. This watch is just absolutely damn gorgeous. It comes in at 41 millimeters in diameter, 9.5 millimeters in thickness. Don't make me say it. 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 This watch is just highly complicated, highly engineered, highly beautified luxury. The next watch we're going to talk about is one that Tom Brady himself has worn. And there's actually a really interesting story here. A lot of the time, Rolex will actually supply the Middle East with Arabic dials. Now, these Arabic dials, because they're a little bit rarer, because they're only supplied to one part of the world, go for a lot more money. And also just look absolutely insanely cool. And this kind of trend from Rolex began in the 1950s. Rolex began producing 40mm day dates with Arabic dial by special request only. And this was to meet the demand of the wealthy Gulf elite kings and oil barons. The production of these Arabic watches ceased in the 1970s until rising demand, along with watch lovers, finally saw Rolex revive the dial in 2016 at Baselworld. Remember Baselworld? I mean, it's all changed now. It's all watches and wonders now. But yeah, I used to go to Baselworld. That's how old I am. 5 years later, in 2021, Tom Brady is spotted wearing this green dial day date with, of course, the Arabic numerals. It's just beautiful. This watch is in full platinum, so it's super, super heavy, has a beautiful olive green dial, and it's very expensive. It comes in at around about £100,000. Thank you guys so much for watching this Chisholm Hunter video. If you have enjoyed, please consider hitting that subscribe button or follow our Instagram at Chisholm Hunter Watches or my Instagram at HB Lifelens or our podcast at Into the Mind Podcast or just the Into the Mind Podcast. And I'll see you guys real soon.